What's up, guys? 3-3 last night, so another slight loss, even though Presbyterian and who was the other one? The New Orleans Pelicans both hit on the money line as underdogs, so it's a very small loss, but even so, another loss as we continue on. And the three plays that I added after the original three are the three that won, this is just how it's going right now. This is bad. I mean, it's a grind. Like, things always turn around for me, so I assume that will be the case. Hopefully that will be the case. Let's get into today, man. What do we want to do here? Start with the NHL, just because I don't have that much to say in the NHL, but I am on one play, which is going to be on the Arizona Coyotes. This is going to be the first play that I'm making since the All-Star break here. This is an interesting situation because Vegas has gone down from minus 155 to minus 137 on the money line. So the money does look like it's moving the line towards Arizona. Vegas has 61% of the tickets, but 76% of the cash on them. So cash discrepancy on them for now. I mean, you know they're going to be a public team. I don't know if the cash discrepancy is going to actually remain on that side or not, but I was able to grab Arizona at plus 120. I believe in this, or plus 124, excuse me. So still is a decent under. You can get them in some range like that. This is an interesting situation, probably a situation unlike what else you're going to see on the board. Vegas played one game back from the break so far, and they beat Edmonton and ended Edmonton's long win streak. And I had mentioned that I leaned to Vegas in that one because I thought that the All-Star break was really going to hurt Edmonton's momentum, and it did. And Edmonton's insanely long win streak going into the break finally ended, and the Knights did it. Vegas was able to do that. Now, coming off that win, I don't think Vegas is in a great spot. I think they're in a letdown spot, and they have to go to Arizona, who's kind of just lying in wait. And Arizona, I don't know if they're the only team left that hasn't played since the All-Star break, but they have not played since the All-Star break. So they're coming into this game with a lot of rest, and they went into the All-Star break losing 3 straight games, though they were all on the road. Not easy games against Florida, Tampa, and Carolina, but they did give up 6 goals in each of the first 2, so they did not play well in those games. But going into the break, now I think they're going to be able to kill that losing momentum. They're going to be able to prepare for this. They have a long time off to prepare for this game, so I think they're going to have something here. I like Arizona to show up here, whereas I think Vegas is in a letdown spot. Vegas has Minnesota up next. It's not really a huge game, but nonetheless, Minnesota is almost like perceived as like a better team than Arizona in some ways. I think, even though I think they have the worst record, just because Minnesota's kind of been like around the playoff field recently, and they were in it last year. So I don't know, but I like the spot that Arizona's in. They got a lot of rest, a lot of time off that I think will allow them to change what wasn't working in those bad 3 games leading into the break, allow them to break that momentum. And they got Vegas coming in a letdown spot. And Arizona's got to get this game really, man, because they go out on the road after this. So I think they are definitely going to be focused on this game. They know that they just have this one game at home here before they have to go out on the road. So I think they're going to be focused, want to get the win here. The money, it looks like it's moving in my direction here, even though the cash discrepancy doesn't look good on that. So that's the one hockey play. First, getting back into hockey after the All-Star break. Hopefully, things are going to start picking up, man. I like these small underdogs in the NHL. So that's a good one. I like it. So we're going with the Arizona Coyotes. NBA, we got some interesting situations here. There are a couple games that I just am not going to get on for now, but are interesting at least, where I don't think the Chicago Bulls are in a good spot because they just beat Minnesota. I mean, that's a huge upset win. So they're in a letdown spot coming off of that, having to go now out on the road to face Memphis. Memphis has kind of been a mess since they lost Ja. They're on a massive loss streak. So they did just lose to some good teams, though. They've run into a bunch of good teams in this loss streak. Like, none of these losses are really bad against the Pacers, the Kings, the Cavs, the Warriors, maybe the worst team, actually, shockingly, somehow, that they faced during that stretch. And then they got absolutely annihilated by the Celtics, whatever, and then lost at the Knicks. That's a tough game as well. I think it's a spot where Memphis, I would expect them to kind of show up focused here, and the Bulls are in a letdown spot. I'm not playing this game, but I do lean to the Grizzlies, but the market looks like it's very much against that. For some reason, the Bulls up from 5.5 to 5.5 with juice on the road. Grizzlies, 77% of the tickets and 53% of the cash. Kind of surprising to see the Grizzlies being like the public team. and the cash discrepancy kind of being on the other side on Chicago. That's a little bit bizarre because Chicago has the better record, and they are the better team, as the line is telling you, especially with John Morant not there for the Grizzlies. So I don't know what's up with what we're seeing in the market there, but just looking at the situation, I would lean against the Chicago Bulls there. The Milwaukee Bucks, I believe, are returning home from a long road trip, right? But they're facing the Minnesota T-Wolves, so I would not expect the Bucks to be unfocused here. They had a bad road trip where they went 1-4, I believe, but normally, as I always say, the return home is like a bad like distraction spot typically, but when you're facing the Minnesota Timberwolves, I don't think you're going to be unfocused, man. I think you're going to want to show up against the T-Wolves, although I do still think that the Bucks are in the worst spot here because the T-Wolves are coming in mid-road trip and they just lost to Chicago, so they're probably looking ahead to this. So the T-Wolves, I think, are in a more like embarrassed spot. They might be in a little bit more of an angry mood after a bad loss there, so it does look like the money is moving towards the T-Wolves as well. Bucks down from 2-1, 80% of the tickets on them, but 59% of the cash. I don't know if there are injuries getting involved in this one either. I'm not really sure because the line is suggesting that the T-Wolves are the rather significantly better team. And I think they might be the better team, but maybe not that significantly. So I don't know what's up with that line, but I think the cash discrepancy does agree with me on this one because I do slightly lean to the T-Wolves because I think the Bucks are in the worst spot for sure because it is a road trip return, whereas at least the T-Wolves are in the middle of a road trip and did not play well in the first game. So that's the way I look at that one. And then there is one other return home spot, which is the LA Lakers, and the market looks like it's against this one too. They have 76% of the tickets, but only 62% of the cash on. So Lakers look like they're getting some public action, maybe just because of the name, because they are the LA Lakers. I mean, they are above 500 now, but even so, it's the Lakers have not been that good a team. And this is Denver coming into their house. Denver sitting around a 3.5 point favorite. The market indicators early on, at least this morning, do look like they're on the Nuggets, like I said, because the Lakers have more of the public action and less of the cash than the tickets. So that is indicating on the Nuggets. The Lakers returning home from a long road trip. So again, that's a bad spot to be in there. So I do lean to the Nuggets, but I don't think I want to play this. The Lakers, I mean, obviously they have reason to be focused. I mean, you're not going to be unfocused when you have the Denver Nuggets coming into your house. So I don't know about that. And the Nuggets are coming off a couple wins in a row against the Trailblazers, which I don't know if that's very impressive, really. They kind of just, I don't think they were that focused on the Trailblazers, even though they're still able to get both wins. They didn't win by that much, really. So I don't know. But what are the games I'm actually going to be on here? In the NBA, I'm laying the Indiana Pacers -6.5, even though it does seem like a lot to lay against the Golden State Warriors. But I think the Warriors are in a terrible spot, man. And Indiana's record isn't that much better than Golden State, and Golden State still carries a lot of name recognition, of course. So I think the public might not really well, it looks like the public is on the Pacers, unfortunately. So Pacers up from 6 to 6.5, and they have 76% of the tickets, but only 75% of the cash. I don't know if that will like start moving in the other direction because I don't see much reason to want to be on the Warriors here. Pacers maybe getting a little bit of extra adjustment in the line because it is a back-to-back for Golden State, but this is a bad spot for Golden State, dude. They're finishing a road trip where they've done pretty well on the road trip. They're 3-1 on the road trip. And they've had almost no time off here, and they just won at Philadelphia, even though it's without Joel Embiid. Huge win over the Philadelphia 76ers. That's the second time they've beaten the 76ers in a little bit over a week, basically. So that's pretty crazy as well. Golden State's coming off that with no time off now, playing a back-to-back, a third game in 4 nights, a fourth game in 6, and a fifth game in 7 days on this road trip, all in different cities. That's really difficult. And then when they come back home, they get Phoenix. Then they have to go out to Utah and then play the Clippers and then go out to Utah again and then play the Lakers. So it's possible they overlook Indiana here, man. I mean, Indiana's kind of the weaker team in that stretch it's a little bit of a sandwich between Philadelphia and Phoenix. That was a big win over Philadelphia for the Warriors, man, even though the Warriors were actually favored with Joel Embiid out, and Maxey actually might have been out in that game too. So it was against a real shell of a 76ers team. 76ers are really faded, really fallen. But actually, Maxey did play in that game. He just didn't have a good game there. So really, it was just without Embiid. But Golden State absolutely annihilated them, dude. So I think Golden State might be feeling a little high on themselves coming out of that. They have no time off here. Have to go to Indiana, and Indiana's had time off, and they're kind of just lying in wait here. Indiana has had 1 day off, and in their previous game, they beat Houston, which is not very impressive, and they didn't even cover against Houston. Indiana has been putting up a ton of points, but they were losing for the whole first half in that game, basically, and really had to escape. They did not play well in that game, and they had to shoot almost 63% from the field to even get over the hump there and beat Houston. Houston massively out-rebounded them in that game. It was a bad performance by Indiana as a big favorite, having to escape. So I like that aspect of it too. I think when you're a big favorite like that and you almost lose, that tends to refocus you a little bit. So I like Indiana here. The rest spot is a lot better for them, and Golden State's kind of in a letdown spot, coming off a big win over the 76ers, and Indiana coming off kind of an embarrassing performance there. So I like Indiana here to get it done. So I lean to the Pacers. The market looks like it is moving in that direction, so I try to get this before it hits 7. Excuse me. And then in the other game that I'm going to be on in the NBA is going to be on the Portland Trailblazers, although I don't know if it makes sense to wait a little bit on this one or not, because they're up from 5 to 6. I was able to you're able to lay 6 on the Portland Trailblazers right now. They have 92% of the cash, but only 79% of the tickets. So they are public because they're playing the Detroit Pistons, but this is a bad spot for the Pistons, dude. So I like the Trailblazers here, but here's the thing about the Pistons. So you got to pay attention to the injury situation here. So the Pistons are in a bad spot. They're in a back-to-back, and they just won at Sacramento last night. They had a couple days off going into that game, but they won by double digits. They just had kind of a dominant performance, which is shocking, against Sacramento on the road. Sacramento was returning from a road trip. I had mentioned Sacramento was in a bad spot, so I did lean to Detroit, but I did not expect Detroit to win the game outright by double digits as a 13.5-point underdog. And it was without their top 2 scorers. Cunningham and Bogdanovich both did not play for the Pistons, so it was like a double injured player theory situation going on there too. So I probably should have played the Pistons just because the number was a little bit too high there, but the Pistons pulled off a shocking win there. Now they have no time off, and they have to go up into Portland before they go to LA to face the Clippers, which I think you might, even if you're the Pistons, you have the worst record in basketball, you might still have one eye looking ahead to the Clippers. And then you got the Lakers and Phoenix coming up after that. So some bigger games coming up on the road trip here. You just pulled off a giant upset too. And now you have no time off after that, and you have to go and play the Portland Trailblazers, who are also a pretty lowly team. And I don't think Portland's going to really want to lose a game in embarrassing fashion to the Detroit Pistons. So I think they're probably going to want to show up here. Portland is coming off a couple games where, they played pretty decently against Denver. In Denver, but they've had 3 days off since then, so their rest situation is way better. That might be factored into the line a little bit. The one reason I say you might want to wait on this, though, is to see what happens with the injury situation, because if the Pistons are going to get either Cunningham or Bogdanovich or both of them back in this game, this line can only go down a bit. So you might get more value on the Trailblazers if you wait on this, because this line, I believe, is taking into account the fact that it looks like they one or both might not even suit up for this game. So we'll have to see what the injury situation is. So I think it might be okay to wait on this one a little bit. I don't think it's going to get as far as like 7. I don't know, though, because the Blazers are public, so you never really know with these lines. So like, you really have to see if you think they're actually going to play in this game or not. It looks like they're both questionable right now, so there's a decent possibility they will. So this one's a little bit tough to determine when you want to actually play this thing, because I would not want to lay 7 or more on the Blazers here. It is a bad spot for the Pistons, though. But yeah, because the Blazers do have the public action right now, that might I don't know if it'll really have influence on the line, because this isn't like the NFL, this isn't the Super Bowl, but even so, well, we'll have to see what happens, really. So just because they are kind of heavily public and they have the heavy cash on them right now, that gives me a little bit of hesitation, because it looks like that could potentially drive the line up a little bit more. So it's a little bit maybe dangerous. Actually, you can get 5.5 right now. I see at one spot on the Blazers as well. So 5.5. maybe not too bad. But if Detroit has the star players coming back, I actually still like Portland because I think the line might drop a little bit on Portland, and you'll get into the reverse injured player theory situation that I talk about, where Detroit, not only would they then be in a letdown spot, but they're thinking we just beat Sacramento without our top two scorers. Like, they might get a bit overconfident coming into the next game. Then they have to like shuffle the lineup and bring those guys back if they're coming back. So that can kind of like jar like any like momentum that they might have started with the lineup without them, with that nice win without them. So the reverse injured player theory, you tend to want to go against the team with those stars returning back because they tend to get a little bit overvalued in the market, and they might get a little bit complacent if they won without them, which Detroit certainly did, coming off a massive upset win there. So a lot of factors there that make me like the Portland side there. It's just the question of when you want to get in on the number. Going to college basketball, I do have 3 plays in college basketball. I don't know if really many of the other games are even worth talking about. It's a big slate for a Thursday, although it's a lot of smaller conferences playing. But I don't think we're used to seeing slates as big as they are now on Thursdays and Fridays here. But there are 3 plays that I do like in college basketball, and I'm on them. The first play is going to be we'll start out in the 8 p.m. slate. So I have one in the 8 p.m., one in the 9, and one in the 10 Eastern time. Denver -2.5 is going to be the first one. This is a spot that I like. If you look at, like, we're now getting into the second meeting situation where teams are playing their conference foes for the second straight time. So there are a few things that make me like Denver in this game against South Dakota. So this is at South Dakota. South Dakota, though, they're coming off a big game on the road at South Dakota State, who may be the best team in this conference, I guess, besides St. Thomas, maybe. But St. Thomas isn't eligible for the tournament yet because they're in the transition period. So unfortunately for them, because they have a decent shot at winning the Summit, because it's not a very strong league this year. But if they were to do so, they would not be able to get into the NCAA tournament yet because they're in transition. So that's unfortunate because they are good enough to they are good enough for a tournament berth. I mean, why not? If you win this conference, even though you'd be a very low seed in the tournament, why not? But South Dakota State looks like they might be the favorite to do it right now. They're actually in second place now because North Dakota has been playing pretty well. But South Dakota, that's a big game against South Dakota State, dude. That was a game where South Dakota State was a huge favorite, too, a 15.5-point favorite. South Dakota State has been the dominant of these two teams in South Dakota for who knows how long. It's always been South Dakota State's state for as long as I can remember. So South Dakota is like the little brother in South Dakota to South Dakota State. And South Dakota put up a huge performance there, man, and they did not go away. They were losing most of the game, but they never really were out of the game. And they played it close, like pretty much the whole way, man. Wound up losing by 3 at the end. But as huge underdogs against your biggest rival, basically, that's going to be tough to step back up off the mat after this for South Dakota. So they're in a hangover spot after a huge performance against their biggest rival as a big underdog. Not only that, though, but they're facing Denver, who has not been playing that well either. And Denver just came off a kind of an ugly loss at Oral Roberts, although Oral Roberts was favored. Denver got into the lead, a decent-sized lead in the second half. They were up by like 9 in the middle of the second half and blew the game. And I think that might focus Denver a little bit. But not only that, but I think they're going to be extra focused here because, yeah, they did beat South Dakota earlier in the season not too long ago. So you might say, but wait a minute, that means South Dakota is going to want revenge, right? Well, maybe they'll want revenge, but I think that's going to serve to focus Denver a little bit more here because in that game, Denver was a 9.5-point favorite, and South Dakota had them on the ropes for most of the second half. South Dakota was leading that game as a big underdog for most of the second half, and then the game just became a crazy, like, barn burner of a game that went into double overtime, which I watched the overtime periods and the last part of the second half of that game. That game got crazy, and Bruner on Denver scored 49 points. He almost hit the 50 mark, and Denver was going crazy and whatever after they won that game. But Denver, I think they realized this South Dakota team really put up a good performance against us. And South Dakota in that game shot 58.3% from 3-point range, man, and 52% from the field. I don't think that's going to happen again. They're not going to shoot 58.3% from 3 again. And that's what they had to do to really give Denver a run for their money there. Denver is the way better team, and I think that's going to serve to focus Denver here. So Denver was a 9.5-point favorite in that one. Now they're only a 2.5-point favorite on the road here. I think that number's a little bit short on Denver. So I think there's a little bit of value there. It looks like Denver's 3 at a lot of spots right now. I don't see the market percentages on this. And then Ken Palm, I think, has this number higher than that. He's got Denver winning this game by 4. South Dakota, one of the worst teams in the country, really, at 321 out of 362. So way near the bottom there. And Denver up at 224. So Denver almost 100 ranking points higher. Denver definitely the better team. And they have reason to be focused here because South Dakota gave them a real tough game in their own house back on January 25th. So I think Denver's going to remember that. That's going to serve to focus them. And South Dakota, like I said, they're coming off a real tough game against their biggest rival in South Dakota State, and almost being able to do that and just hanging with them is a huge underdog. So I don't know if they're going to have that much left in the tank here. I like Denver minus 2.5. That's play number 1. Play number 2 is also going to be one of these second meeting plays, and that's going to be to lay the points with Morehead State minus 10.5. I like this one too against SIU Edwardsville, who is really not a good team. Morehead, KenPom has Morehead ranked like at least 150 ranking points higher, I think, than SIU Edwardsville. And he's got this, I believe he's got Morehead winning this game by about 11 or 12 in this game. The reason I like this game so much doesn't really have to do with what Edwardsville has been doing, because Edwardsville did just lose their last game. They've been playing okay. They've been moving up in the standings a bit. So people might look at this and think, well, maybe this line's, I don't know, like it looks like maybe a little bit high just because Edwardsville doesn't have that bad a record, but everybody kind of knows the name Morehead because they had Kenneth Fareed back in the day, and they made some tournament appearances. They've been one of the better teams in the conferences that they've been in. Now they're in the Ohio Valley, and they're the best team in the Ohio Valley right now. And SIU Edwardsville is coming off kind of a bad loss at home to UT Martin, so that doesn't really make me want to be going against SIU Edwardsville. And of course, they're probably going to be focused because it is Morehead State. But I think Morehead State has real reasons to be focused here, and they are the way better team. So Morehead State, they're also coming off a game where they only beat Tennessee Tech by 7 points, and they did not play well. Morehead was a double-digit favorite in that game, and they wound up losing the lead in the second half, and they were kind of on the ropes there, and they could have lost that game, so that might put a scare into them. When you have a good team like Morehead is the much better team in this game, and if they have reason to be focused, I don't really care as much if SIU Edwardsville is going to want to play well against them. If Morehead shows up as the better team, I think they're going to be able to do it. And so I think that'll be the case here because Morehead really was on the ropes there. And Tennessee Tech only had 4 turnovers against them. Morehead almost lost as a double-digit favorite in that game. And that was on the road, and they're coming back home now. So I think that's going to focus them. But the main reason I really like this game is because Morehead State has only 1 loss in the conference this year. And who was that loss to? Oh, yeah, it was to SIU Edwardsville, who they're playing tonight. That was on the road, and they lost by 13, and Morehead had a horrific game in that game. Morehead only shot 30.6% from the field and had an 11.1% three-point percentage. So that's just ridiculous, man. If you look at that game, Morehead, they shot, that's like a very much an outlier of an extremely low field goal percentage and 3-point percentage there. I don't think that's going to happen again for Morehead. I don't think that they're going to have a really, really off shooting night like that again. And they know SIU Edwardsville, when you're the team that's leading the conference and you have 1 loss, you're going to remember who beat you and who gave you that 1 loss. That was SIU Edwardsville. That's going to motivate Morehead. You got to think, man, they're going to want the revenge here. They lost as a favorite in that game. Of course, they were a 4.5-point favorite in that game. So the 10.5 in this game is kind of indicative of a similar line there. 10.5 makes sense if they're 4.5 on the road. 10.5, maybe even a little bit short here, which I kind of think it is, which is why I like Morehead here. I like the situation from Morehead more because they're coming off a scare. As much as SIU Edwardsville did get blown out in their last game, Morehead has multiple reasons to be focused here. Coming off a scare and facing the team that dealt them their only conference loss so far this year, I think they're going to want to stick it to them. I like Morehead. Morehead is the way better teamer. I like Morehead. Yes, thank you. Morehead. Nobody's ever made that joke before. Morehead State minus 10.5. And then to close this out, I think I'm actually maybe bucking what I'm seeing in the market on Washington State, Oregon State, maybe. And Washington State, I don't know if there are injuries or what's going on here, but Washington State is up from 7.5 to 9. All of a sudden, Washington State getting a lot of respect in the market, and maybe it's not quite warranted. I mean, Ken Baum has Washington State ranked 43rd, which isn't really that good, and he has them only winning this game by 6, but the line is up to like 9. You can get I got 9.5 with Oregon State. I don't know if this line might even keep going up further. I don't even know, but I don't like the spot at all for Washington State here. I think this is a sandwich. They just went into overtime on the road. This is now going to be their second straight road game. They're actually coming off 3 big games in a row where they beat Utah and really wrecked them by 20-something. Then they won by 9 against Colorado. Then they went on the road to their main rival there in Washington. But, of course, Washington a bit down this year. Washington State beat them in overtime, too. And now all of a sudden, Washington State is second in the conference. Like, what is going on here? And this conference, I mean, it's not a very good conference, although I think Utah and Colorado are actually better than Washington State. I think they're both power rated higher than Washington State, but Washington State, all of a sudden, from out of nowhere, they're like on the tournament bubble. They're in second place in the conference behind Arizona. This is getting a little weird, but now they have their second straight road game. They're coming off 3 huge games in a row, 3 big wins, beating Utah and Colorado, who I think are both better than they are, and then beating their rival Washington in overtime. How much left are they going to have in the tank, having to go to Oregon State? And then after this, they have to face Oregon, who's basically tied with them in the conference, right behind them in the conference pretty much. And that's the game they have up next. So this is kind of a sandwich spot, man, coming off 3 straight big games, including the big rivalry against Washington, having to go to Oregon State. And they already beat Oregon State at home, too, even though I think Washington State actually didn't cover in that game. They were double-digit favorites. They were leading for almost the entire second half in that game, at least, and they won by 7. So it wasn't really that much of a sweat. So I think they might overlook Oregon State a little bit here, man. Oregon State is going to be looking for something here. They're sitting at 11-11 on the season overall. They don't want to drop below 500. And I think they have more reason to be focused on here because in their last game, they got totally embarrassed, losing by almost 30 to USC. And when you lose by almost 30, especially if it's to a team that's not really that good, and in this case, USC, the worst team in the Pac-12, record-wise at least, that's an embarrassing loss, dude. Like, you're going to have to refocus after that. I think Oregon State's going to be primed to put in a much better performance here. And you got to remember, not that long ago, they beat Arizona and Arizona State on this floor. Arizona being, of course, a massive upset. Arizona State really has not been playing that well, so that's not really as impressive. But Oregon State won their last 2 games on this floor, so they played much better at home than on the road, at least. They're 3-2, I believe, in the conference in their home games, at least. And the 2 losses were to UCLA by 7 and to Stanford by 4. So no team has beaten them by this margin on their home floor this entire season in the Pac-12 conference. So that bodes well for taking Oregon State as a big underdog at home. I like that aspect of it. Ken Baum has this line much shorter. I think the spot is bad for Washington State. Washington State likes to play a slow tempo. They're 300th in the nation in tempo. And Oregon State, what do they play? They play also a very slow tempo at 297. So even though Washington State's probably going to want to match that tempo, they're both going to wind up probably playing a slow tempo game here because that's what they both want to do. That also bodes well for a home underdog of a substantial size like this. A slower game means points are going to be harder to come by, so it's going to be harder to cover to win by margin in this game. So all that puts me on Oregon State. And the one other thing I'll mention before I get out of here about yesterday's slate that pisses me off is that I should have gone 4-2 yesterday, man, because the thing was that San Antonio, that was a wire-to-wire cover for San Antonio. They were not losing by more than 8 the entire way into the fourth quarter. They went into the fourth quarter, I think, only down 1 point, and then they lost they kind of blew it, and then they were losing by like 7 or 8 for a lot of it, but they were still within 7 or 8 in the final minute of that game, so they still could have covered the 8.5, and they wound up falling just on the wrong side of it. It's just brutal, man, especially when with the intentional free throws, teams usually stop at like a 7-point margin there. That was just brutal. San Antonio statistically played that game really close. The stats were close in that game. That absolutely should have been a cover for the San Antonio Spurs. So that is brutal. It should have been a winning day for me for once last night. We got to get back on the winning side, man. Too many of these games are just falling against me. A lot of them when I don't think that they should. So let's start turning it around here, man. Let's have a better Thursday. I got a pretty packed card here on Thursday. Once again, those plays in the NHL: Arizona Coyotes plus 124, NBA Indiana Pacers minus 6.5, and Portland Trailblazers minus 5.5. Or I don't know if Detroit's going to get some of those guys back. You might be able to get a little bit of a better number on Portland, but the spot is real bad for Detroit. And in college basketball, we got Denver minus 2.5, Morehead State minus 10.5, and Oregon State plus 9.5. That's going to do it for me, man. Have a good one. I'll get an NFL video out maybe tonight, actually, to talk about the Super Bowl. So luckily, at least I think the props that I'm on, you'll probably still be able to find good numbers on them because they're all kind of going against where the public sentiment is going to be, at least. So we'll talk about it. Peace, man.